All right, well, good evening and welcome to this edition of History and Highballs as part of the North Carolina Museum of History's History at Home initiative. We're so glad that you're joining us for this evening's program, The Evolution of Female Superheroes, featuring artist and business owner Jazmin Truesdale. My name is Stacy and I handle adult education over at the museum. So whenever you sign up for one of these History and Highballs, you and I will virtually get to spend the evening together, listening to some incredible stories about North Carolina places and people and what makes our state so special. Tonight's program is just one of many exciting digital offerings available through MOH. So if you'd like to learn more about our History at Home initiative, head over to our website at www.ncmuseumofhistory.org. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our North Carolina Museum of History Associates and Foundation for making this evening possible. Our associates and foundation provide crucial funding and support, which in addition to many other things, helps make events like this evening's event happen. We would also like to thank those of you who graciously donated funds towards this evening's program. We endeavor to keep our programming free to attend, but there are costs associated with these series, and we continue to be humbled by your generous support of the museum and its programming. So thank you so much for that. If you haven't already used the link in your Eventbrite email to check out the cocktail tutorial for this evening's specially themed cocktail, the Girl Power Cocktail, we invite you to head over and do that now on the museum's YouTube channel. Make sure you also check out the museum shop website for fun Superwomen items and other merchandise celebrating women, as well as lots of other great North Carolina related gifts. While the museum remains closed, the museum shop is open on limited hours from Tuesday through Saturday. You can learn more about those limited hours as well as all of the Shiro gifts that we have available by heading to ncmuseumofhistoryshop.com. A few quick housekeeping items for this evening. We ask that you please keep your mic muted through the entirety of the program, and that if you have any questions for our speaker, please type them into the chat function located at the bottom center of your screen. At the end of the lecture, I will ask the speaker as many of your questions as time allows. Okay, so it is my honor to introduce this evening's speaker, CEO of Aza Entertainment and Aza Comics, Jazmin Truesdale, also known as the Superwoman of Superwomen. She is the CEO at Aza Comics, a superhero brand known for its roster of multicultural superheroes. She is a nerd at heart and loves science fiction, comic books, action movies, and the like. It was her passion for more empowerment of female representation that led her to create the Aza Comics superhero universe. So Jazmin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining me as I talk about my favorite topic always, which is history and female superheroes. So as she was saying, Aza Comics is an all-women superhero universe. So of course, this is kind of like my thing, and I am super excited to talk about it with everyone. So getting started, just want to ask a quick question and see if anybody knows who the first female superhero was. I'm gonna give you a minute to type it into the chat, and then I'm going to jump start into my presentation. A lot of Wonder Womans. Supergirl. Let's see. There's actually a little bit of debate on who the first female superhero is. I think I got it. Give me some interesting answers. Okay, so I am going to jumpstart. Don't know if anybody knows this, but it's actually a superhero named Phantoma. And it is by a comic book company called Jungle Comics. And she debuted in February of 1940, like just before Wonder Woman, who was the following year. So Phantoma, actually, I will pull this up and I'll share a screen with everybody so everyone can see it. Phantoma had the ability to, she could levitate, she had flight, the ability of flight, and she also had like a transmutation power as well. But pretty much she is considered to be the actual first female superhero. And after her, it was Wonder Woman, who we all know and love. Excited for the movie, hope everyone else is. But she emerged in 1941 by who we now know as DC Comics, and she was written or created by William Marston, and she was inspired pretty much from his relationship with his wife and their life partner. And if anyone has ever actually seen the movie Professor Marston and the Wonder Women, it explains a lot of pretty much the backstory to him creating the characters and a lot of the struggles that they went through. But the 1940s, pretty much which was the time of World War II. And this was an era where we saw the draft taking place and a lot of men going overseas and fighting in the war, and women stepping into the roles that were traditionally by men and taking on a lot of things that traditionally men would do. So this was also the emergence of WAC, which was the Women's Army Corps. And if anyone is a lover of old films, there's this kind of rare old film with Lana Turner where she and two other women go into the Women's Army Corps, and you start to see kind of like the vigorous training that they go through. The three women ended up becoming like mechanics, and there's this whole thing where we see this kind of, I don't want to say it's like propaganda, but this kind of thing that was like encouraging women to be active in supporting the war and things of that nature. And then we saw in general just a lot of women taking on traditional male roles, and we saw this being reflected in comic books. So while during this time, yes, Superman was created a little bit before that, but during this time when we were seeing a lot of women taking on these roles within World War II, we saw a lot of female superheroes being created to reflect that empowerment and showing up alongside male superheroes like Wonder Woman. So the super popular one was Superman, and then I guess his counterpart that was created was hyped to be Wonder Woman at that time. Wonder Woman was incredibly successful, and actually during the 40s, during this time, she outsold Superman in comic books, which is interesting. Wonder Woman is also the only female superhero to be in publication nonstop from the time she was created in 1941. So during this era and all the reflection of all of these wonderful women going out and supporting the war, becoming empowered, self-actualizing, and doing all of these incredible things, and seeing that reflection in the comic books as well, when the war was over, that was a completely different story. So what happened is when the men came back from war, a lot of women lost their jobs. So they were like, the men are here, bye girls, don't really need you, go get married. It was actually not uncommon during this time for a company policy to be that they didn't hire married women. That was something that a lot of women were experiencing. If anybody's familiar with like women's baseball, like there was a time in American history where that was like the biggest sport. And then when the men came back from the war, they pulled all of the funding from women's baseball into men's baseball, and then that slowly disintegrated. So it was a lot of things happening, and the comic books actually reflected that as well. So in this transition of women coming out of the workplace, coming out of the Army Corps, going back into, I guess you could say, the kitchen, this archetype character called the femme fatale started to emerge. And the femme fatale pretty much we often see her as like the villain in comic book characters. She's the woman that kind of doesn't want to go back to her place. That's the way she's often depicted. Anyone else who's really into old films at this time as well, this was like the era of film noir. And a lot of times the central story, it's very much centered around women who are unhappy. Usually they're married to men who are older, whether they married for love at first, or they married out of necessity, and then they're like recruiting some guy to kill that guy so that they can like get money and go on about it's a mess. But this was this archetype that was often pushed during this time, not only in film but also in comic books as well, to kind of say, oh, women, if you should go and get married, have some children. Anything outside of that, you could end up dead. You can end up in prison because of these stories that they were telling, where these women, these femme fatales, were often having these very negative endings. Like the end to their story was never good. And that was kind of something that was pushed to women during this time. So now, as we're like ending the 1940s, the war is over. We're now heading into the 50s. The 50s was very much a time period of, I guess you could call, you started to see the emergence of like the suburbs. It was very family oriented. During this time, it was very much about, you know, the nuclear family, the White House and the picket fence, the dog, the husband and the wife with the 2.5 kids, or the husband and the wife with 2 kids and the dog in the house with the picket fence. Like that was very much the pushed view of the ideal America, and comic books reflected that as well. In the 1950s, we actually started to see the decline of female superheroes, and the superheroes that were very prominent at that time started to take a backseat to the male superheroes at that time as well. So during this time, there was the Comics Magazine Association of America. They created a code that pretty much said, we need to tell girls that they need to go out and get married and have children. Like that's what we need to be pushing these values out there. That's what we need to see. At this time, during the 40s, there was an increase of women who were going to school. They were going to university. They were going out and getting jobs. There weren't a lot of women doing more traditional things. And in the 50s, we actually saw the decline in women going to university. We saw an increase in marriage, increase in women having babies, less women going into the workforce because of that. And they wanted comic books to really reflect, really pushing this. So that's why we have this lovely comic book here called True Love by the True Love Comics that was basically bride-to-be romances. And that was kind of the place of women, or what they were trying to push to women during this time. In the 50s. At the same time, we're seeing it everywhere. So if anyone watches television from the 50s, this was the era of Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. This was very much a reflection. Comic books were very much a reflection of that. So in all of this, when we're heading into the 60s, where we see a lot of civil unrest happening in America with the civil rights movement, we see a lot of things happening in that. There was one particular comic book company that did not want to conform. DC Comics very much conformed. They wanted to do that. They wanted to conform to the code. They dialed back on their female superheroes, whereas Marvel, they created the Fantastic Four and created a lovely comic book character that we're all pretty familiar with, named Susan Storm, Invisible Girl. So in this, Marvel pretty much was like, yeah, nah, we're going to keep making our female characters. We're going to keep pushing them. We don't really care about the code. So in this, during this time period, we're still seeing the aftermath of the end of World War II. So in this aftermath, and when we were seeing the decline in women going to college, this decline in women going to work, and we're seeing the increase of women women marrying, having children, this burst of the suburbs during this time period as well. When we're seeing all of this, there was this, it was a book that came out in the mid-1960s called The Feminine Mystique, and it was by Betty Friedan. And it basically explained this overall sense of discontentment that women were feeling during this time that they didn't know how to vocalize. And it came from this desire to want to do more than be within the home. Like, you know, they love being moms, they love being married, but they wanted to do more, but society kind of wasn't allowing them to do that, and they didn't know how to vocalize it. And this book became very popular as a bestseller. Sold over like 1 million copies during its time, and people often credit it to being the early beginnings of the second wave feminist movement. So, and a lot of times people refer back to it. But during this time, when you're seeing this kind of conflicting thing within comic books, where you have like the big two, Marvel and DC, where one is very much conforming, the other one is very much pushing the envelope still. It's interesting to see how comic books still play a huge role in reflecting society and how their characters are developed, how storylines are indeed written. So as we're doing all of this and we're heading into the 1970s, see Wonder Woman there, it's my favorite superhero. And pretty much people are pretty familiar with what happened in the 70s. This was the era of the feminist movement, and comic books yet again reflected that. So in the 70s, we started to see the emergence of all of these mediums, all of these modes of entertainment reflecting women's empowerment from Blaxploitation. We saw the emergence of Pam Grier in Foxy Brown. We see television shows being developed like Wonder Woman, Bionic Woman, Charlie's Angels, all of these things being developed, very much reflecting women's empowerment, seeing them in action, doing all of these things. And at the height, or very much during the women's movement, Wonder Woman was very much at the forefront of that. So in this era, we're actually starting to see her develop her powers more. We're starting to see her increase in strength. One of the things in the early beginnings of Wonder Woman, her lasso allowed her to actually get people to do what she wanted them to do. It allowed her to be able to, in many ways, control them. And when Marston died and other writers took over, as a reflection of the time, they actually diminished the power of her lasso. And here we're actually starting to see in the 70s, like this kind of increase in her powers in a way to reflect the time period as well. And if anyone watched Bewitched, it's interesting to see in the beginning, in like the mid 1960s when the show started, to the 1970s, around the time towards the end of the show, like the dynamic between Darren and Samantha, and how she became a lot more assertive in her relationship with him during this time in, you know, the feminist era. So it's very interesting, yet again, how superheroes still reflected that time period. Also, we started to see the emergence of like Supergirl, Betty and Veronica. This was also the creation of the X-Men and the creation of one of the most powerful, most popular Black female superheroes that we know of today, Storm. So in this, yet again, Marvel and DC now coming back into the picture, like they are very much pushing their female superheroes. They're creating more, they're bringing them to light. They're doing all of these things to reflect women's empowerment. And we're starting to see their powers grow. We're starting to see more of this emergence of all of this going on within this era, reflecting the society that we are in. Let's see, going on to the 1980s. That's okay. So going on to the 1980s, one of the things that we actually saw was women taking on leadership in comic books, whereas before they were kind of on par. In the 1940s, when the women emerged, they often were like the partners of the male superheroes. They were like his best friend. They were his wife, his girlfriend, and they played a role in that way. And in the 80s, all of these superheroes, these female superheroes that came into play, we actually started to see them take on leadership roles. So like, for example, Storm took on leadership roles in the X-Men. We had Wasp take on leadership in the Avengers. We saw Susan take on leadership in the Fantastic Four. By the way, notate or put in the comments like what your favorite era of Fantastic Four was. I'm just really curious to know. Like some people like the 70s better, some people like the late 90s. Like I'm just curious to see what people say. But yeah, so in this era, we're actually starting to see women take on more leadership roles. And this is also in the 80s where we're seeing women taking on leadership roles within the workforce as well. We're starting to see more like women business owners. This is kind of the emergence of like the power CEO. Anybody who's familiar with like Elizabeth Taylor, she's really known for like starting this like perfume super company, and we're starting to see more women like that taking more control of their careers, developing careers, furthering their careers in the 80s, and that very much reflected in the comic books of the 80s. So as we're kind of like navigating this entire space, we're also going over into the 90s, where it was kind of all about multiculturalism. So in all of this, in the era of like multiculturalism and everything that's going on, we're starting to see more of that reflection here. So in all of this, in that reflection of the 1990s, we're starting to see this kind of like this emergence, this necessity to kind of represent more people. While women were in the 90s still weren't being pushed as hard in comparison to men in terms of like marketing and things like that, we were starting to see a lot more reflection of women, different kinds of women. We actually saw, it was like Batwoman, who recently they created her and represented her as like a lesbian character. We see Wonder Woman, who they reflected as a bisexual character. We're starting to see more just not only just women being put in leadership positions in the creation of the characters, but also being put in the forefront in terms of marketing, which is oftentimes where women kind of didn't get that support. So now with everything, we're starting to see more cultural representation. There's Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, who is Muslim. We're starting to see a lot of different things when it comes to, someone said it, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, they have their own series. Like, you know, maybe 20, 15 years ago, that wouldn't have even been a thought. The way they probably would have did it was have maybe like a male character and they're being supporting characters and being pushed kind of like into that. But now we're actually starting to see that shift where women are actually being pushed to the forefront, leading their own films. Wonder Woman finally got her movie like 70 years later. Batwoman has her own series. We're starting to see things like Black Lightning. We're starting to see a lot more representation. And with me, Birds of Prey, yes, I actually saw that and I really, really liked that movie. Birds of Prey, Black Panther, we're just seeing a lot of this representation take place in the scope of the comic book genre, simply because it's a reflection of the society that we're in now. We're more open. We are talking about things that we need to talk about. We're expressing the need for representation, where previously superheroes and comic books have tended to been more white. We're now starting to see more representation. Comic books reflecting the empowerment that people who are often been neglected are now getting that empowerment. They're now starting to see themselves in positions of empowerment, which then leads to me. So my superhero universe, me being a fan of female superheroes and knowing kind of this history of superheroes, knowing this history in terms of how women are often portrayed in the media, often how even with the creation of these characters, the creation of female characters, how oftentimes they don't get the budget, they don't get the marketing, they don't get the attention that they deserve so that they can be as successful as they can be. It's still a shame when you're walking into a Target or a Walmart and you don't see your favorite female character, but then you see all of the merchandise for all of the male characters. That's disappointing to me still. So for me, it was important to create characters and be able to develop them kind of with the women in mind. So a lot of times, one of the things that I discovered in a lot of my research was that even with female superheroes, they're often still marketed to men. They're still not really marketed to women. And when I was presenting my characters, when I was presenting them to different publishers, they literally did not know how to market this. Like they just didn't have the data for marketing superheroes to women. So a lot of it was me building it from scratch. Like I did interviews with women and girls of different ages, different backgrounds, asking them like why they didn't read comic books, why they did read comic books, what they wanted to see, what they didn't like about the superhero genre, so that I can actually craft a superhero universe with women in mind. And then honestly, surprisingly, a lot of the issues that women had, men had a lot of the same issues as well. So it was one of the things that was like, oh, why don't you like this particular, you know, women character? It's like, she needs her own identity. Like, it was just kind of like, nah, it's kind of like, you know, Batman and whatever. Like, they would give me this kind of thing, and I wanted to create something with the actual consumer in mind. So when I was making everything, one of the things that stood out to me was the actual format of the comic book. And a lot of women were actually turned off, surprisingly, by the actual format of the traditional format of the comic book. Like, they didn't have time to go and buy copies every month. So I said, well, how can I kind of merge the two together? So the thing with Aza Comics is we actually don't even make comic books, we make superhero novels where the action scenes are illustrated like a comic book. So the rest is traditional prose. And then when it gets to the action scene, it becomes a comic book. And then it goes back to the prose. So it becomes like an experience. That was something that I wanted to do. And surprisingly, not only women gravitated to it, like about 60% of Aza's women readership, tongue-tied, Aza's women readership are new to the superhero genre. They never took interest in comic books before, and this was their introduction. And then surprisingly, even like about 40% of Aza's readership are men as well. So with Aza, I wanted to create characters that had different body types, different personalities, different everything, to really show the plethora of all the different kinds of things that a woman can be. A lot of the characters were created based as the antithesis of their stereotypes, to really just kind of expand the mind of what a woman can be, what they can do. My main characters appear the keepers, like they all have different, not only personalities, different jobs. My Indian superhero, Adana, she is a mechanic in Mumbai. She's also darker skinned, and I speak on like the issues that she faces with that. So a lot of the things with the characters, I really delve into the creation, the three-dimensionality, I don't know if that's a word, but really making them very three-dimensional characters that you can relate to, because sometimes and oftentimes when female characters are created, they tend to be based off of female stereotypes, or they're not really given that that attention, like I was talking about before, the attention that they really need in order to be successful. Because if you can't identify with the character, then you can't really, or not even identify with the character, like if you don't really create that fertile ground in the backstory of the character, then it's difficult to make them a leading character. It's difficult to create stories based around them when that background was not created to begin with. And I saw a lot of these kind of pitfalls that other companies were kind of doing, or seeing kind of some of the things where they failed in a particular way. And it's like, oh, I wonder how I could have done that better. Or, you know, or just kind of thinking of different things in terms of how I can enhance it. One of my biggest dreams actually is to do kind of like a crossover with like the women of Marvel and DC. Like, I would love to do that. But one of the things that I like did with like Aza Comics was very much kind of keeping in line with a lot of the tradition of the superhero genre when it came to the women's superheroes, taking a lot of the things that I learned that I loved as well, and listening to what other women said that they would like to have seen, and created like an entire universe that's really built around encouraging and empowering women, putting these characters into positions that women often face, where they're faced with racial inequity or discrimination of some kind, and, you know, kind of responding to it in the way that you wish you could have responded to it, to really give that sense of empowerment. But yeah, like that's my presentation. Like, I hope everybody enjoyed what I had to say. If you have any like comments or any particular character that you wanted to like mention that maybe I skipped over or glossed over, like, I can definitely talk about that in Escape. But comic books were always meant as a sense of empowerment, and very much meant to reflect the culture at that time so that people can see themselves, they can do all of the things that, you know, we wish that we can do. Okay, please introduce each of your characters and give us a bit of their backstories. Yeah, I can do that. So we have Kala, who is here on the right. She is from the Gullah Sea Islands of South Carolina. She speaks Geechee and like 1,000 other languages. She is the leader of the league. She is also, all of these girls, the mythology around the Aza superhero universe is very much kind of like an origin story of people. So in the Aza universe, Earth, there was a major war that was happening in the universe, and people fled to Earth as a way to escape it and seek refuge on Earth. And that is how we got the different people here on Earth. So we have different realms within the Aza universe that are reflective of the different continents and the different ethnic groups of Earth. So each of these girls actually come from one of the planets in the various realms of the Aza universe, and they come to Earth to hide out from a particular villain, Kala's father, who is trying to kill them. So they are the Askari, which are the keepers, and their job is to protect the universe, and they are the next in line. But previously, the Askari have all been corrupt and terrorizing the people of Aza. And Kala's father is the previous Askari, so he's lost his powers. They're gaining the powers, and he is trying to stop them so that he can gain back control. But Kala, she is from Realm 1, which is called the Pangeatic Realm, and she is the leader of the league. She has the power to manipulate force and energy. So she can always match someone's strength. She can absorb energy and shoot off like energy balls, things like that. She can also manipulate gravity, which is a force, and be able to fly. There is Ixchel, who is next to her. You can't really see it, but she's actually holding a book. She is a super genius, and she can hold her hand over a book and absorb all of the energy from that. She also has, her skin becomes electrical when she's super nervous. She's super shy. She's a genius. She got her PhD, her MD by the time she was like 19 years old, and she kind of serves as a team doctor. She's from Bogota, Colombia. There is Amaya. She is in the middle. She's from Seoul, Korea, and she has the power to open up portals and go anywhere she wants to in the universe. She also has super speed. She's very skilled in combat and is kind of like, she's also like a bounty hunter as a job. Like that's what she does. And she also is kind of like the oldest of the group. She sort of keeps everybody grounded. There's Fenna, who's in the center, not the center, who is next to her. She is from London, England. She's a fashion designer. She also is kind of like the thicker girl of the group, and I did that on purpose to speak to women who felt somewhat insecure, maybe about their body and things like that. And I definitely speak on that through her character. Like she desired to be a fashion model, but she was rejected because of the way that she looked. She wasn't as thin as the other girls, and because of that, she ended up taking on that power for herself, empowering herself to create her own fashion line and model her own things and create them for all women in their body types. Then she also has the power to regenerate. So when she gets cut or injured, she can grow the limb back or heal herself. And she also is an empath. She can feel other people's emotions and she can affect other people's emotions. There is Adana. She's from Mumbai, India. She is a mechanic, and she's also like a bit of an engineer nerd. She can see anything and figure out how it works. She not only is a mechanic, but she like restores cars. She pimps out rides, and she's like a racer as well. And she has super strength, and she also has the ability she has like morphing abilities. So she can change into anything she wants. She can make her hand into I don't know, like a tool or anything. She like has like auto shop with no tools, because she can make her hands or her body or anything into whatever tool she needs to fix whatever she needs to fix. And each of the women were very much inspired by like real women. So like Kala was inspired by the African female warriors of Dahomey. Ixchel was inspired by the goddess Ixchel from Mayan culture. The Ixchel is actually from Mayan culture. There's Amaya. She was very much inspired by a lot of K-pop artists. I'm a big K-pop fan. Fenna was inspired by Anna Wintour, and then Adana was inspired by Hedy Lamarr, who gave us the technology for Wi-Fi, as well as Geeta Phogat, who is the first Indian wrestler. Actually, she was the first Indian wrestler, male or female, to win a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. So a lot of them were created by like real people. And I was inspired by the women around me. One of my other characters was inspired by my mom and Janet Jackson. So it's like there's a lot of real people who are very much influential in the creation of the characters in my process of how I go about making them. Were there any other questions?
Jazmin, one of the questions was, where do you see the future of women superheroes going?
Excited. So I'm not one of those people that feels threatened by other women. I see a win for one is a win for all. When Wonder Woman's film came out, I said, oh my gosh, please don't mess this up. Like that was, I've waited my whole life for that movie. But then also at the same time, I very much understood that in my place as a creator of female superheroes, that oftentimes the weight of one thing can impact the rest of us. So if Wonder Woman tanked, it would have been so hard for me to kind of get Aza Comics off the ground. But actually the success of Wonder Woman made it easier for me as a businesswoman, because suddenly everybody was looking up superheroes. When I was talking to potential business partners, it made it super easy for me to explain. They're like, oh, it's universe of like Wonder Woman. I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. There you go. So in all of this, from that, we saw like Black Panther and how much the women of Black Panther were so hyped and so loved and so well received. We saw Captain Marvel. We're now getting a Black Widow movie. We're starting to see a lot more chances. Like a lot more companies are taking chances with like women superheroes. Batwoman getting her own show. Like we're Birds of Prey. Like we're seeing all of this happening. So in my opinion, I think that it's going in a great direction. I'm really happy about it. Even Aza Comics is getting approached by film production companies and TV companies. I'm excited about it. That was a long-winded answer.
Yeah, it's okay. We have another, you already spoke to this a bit, but there was someone who asked if there are any plus size women heroes.
Yes, so Fenna, she is my plus size character. And I did it on purpose. Actually, it was one of my aunts that asked me. She was like, "Can you make a plus size one?" I was like, "Yes, I can." And she's like super into like fashion and all of that kind of stuff. And that's kind of that and like the Anna Wintour sort of personality. I kind of mix it together. And I speak a lot on body types and how that affected her. How she overcame that, and hopefully using her stories and her storylines, or a lot of the instances of the things that she does, as inspirement for women to feel comfortable with themselves, feel better about themselves, take power of their body as well. So yeah, for sure.
Cool. Okay, here's one. Where can your comic books be purchased?
Yes, so you can go to azacomics.shop. And that is where you can find all of the Aza Comics merchandise. Actually, you can get a signed copy or you can get a regular copy. We have a kids line as well, which was actually requested by moms. So I have there's a lot of, the age range for Aza Comics is so vast, from like little kids to, 70-year-old women in their book club. So, there was a lot of moms who were reading the books, and they're like, I would really love a kid's book to be able to share this with my daughter, or dads who read it. And they're like, I'd love to share this with my daughter, who was like under the age I believe, mostly under 10. And so my stepmother, actually, I have a little sister who's 10 now. At the time she was 6, and she actually wrote the kids book, and I put it together and published it. So yeah, a whole thing. azacomics.shop. You can also go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target. They're online. They retail it online. So yeah.
Okay, you addressed this a bit when you were talking about how Wonder Woman, the success of the movie really helped you, but we have someone who asked, can you share an obstacle that you encountered while pursuing this career or marketing your idea?
One of the obstacles was a lot of times with press, they don't want to talk to you unless you're like one of the big two. That's one of the biggest obstacles. Or like in some instances, because it only seems like there's like maybe 3 or 4 major publishing companies. Some of them I couldn't get past the door because they were already working with DC or already working with Marvel. One of the other things, so it's kind of like just, you know, navigating the market. That's kind of been one of the things, but I feel like I've kind of been able to forge my own way. But one of the other ones was really just not having the foundation, like the marketing just was not in place. So if I pitched this to, like, say, a publisher and them saying, we don't know how to market this, like their assumption was that I wouldn't know how to market it either. And I was like, no, like I do. And I would actually have like the marketing in place from the research that I did. So a lot of it was like a lot of trial and error. And just like if I marketed superheroes on, like, let's say Facebook, I did an ad on Facebook and I said, okay, people who are interested in superheroes, the marketing would be geared towards men. So the only people who would see it would be like 80% dudes. So the girls wouldn't even see it. So like a lot of it was me trying to figure out like all of the different marketing metrics to find the women who would be interested in this to be able to market to them. So that was a lot of it. It was just kind of, I didn't really have a blueprint. So I had to sort of create one and really sort of find my way around navigating that to market it and get it out there and really get creative with how I marketed Aza Comics, which hopefully with my research and my data, it can be used for other companies when they're creating superheroes and female superheroes and wanting to market them to women.
I have a question here about the comics as books and literacy. I understand these comics are books with the action scenes illustrated. Do you think this encourages reading?
Yes, that was one of the things as well. Actually encouraged my sister. Like that was one of the first like chapter books that she read. So I definitely would say so. One of the things that they were talking about was like just trying to encourage more kids to read. So it's like if I could have little illustrated surprises throughout the book, maybe that would encourage them to read more. So like who knows, like maybe that can come on to be like a new format in which they're they're like making novels or making comic books. That was just something that I kind of thought of, and I said, hey, maybe that'll work. And it actually did. It actually did.
Hey, I know I'm asking you lots. There are lots of questions here. It's great. Who is the illustrator of your comics?
The illustrator is Romero Colston. I found him on Instagram because he did an illustration of Janet Jackson, and we're both like slightly obsessed with her. So that was actually one of the struggles that I had, was finding an illustrator who could illustrate women in a way that wasn't where their breasts weren't like overdone or kind of with the pornographic elements, just kind of making it more friendly, because I was like, the audience is women. So kind of making it more not as, I guess, offensive. He was absolutely perfect. His specialty is actually illustrating multicultural women. And when I was struggling to find an illustrator for my Black superhero, it's like they would get all the other characters right, but they would struggle with Kala. and oftentimes make her, basically illustrate her like a white woman with brown skin, and didn't really have a concept of what black hair looked like, or, 'cause I have locks, Kala has locks, and like they kind of didn't know how to draw that. So he was absolutely perfect. I asked if he could send over like a test sketch in 20 minutes. It's kind of like his audition. Got back to me within a half an hour, and it was perfect. So yeah.
Okay. Next question. Will you expand your character line to include transgender women?
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. Like I watch Pose, and I was like looking at them, and I was like, oh my God, all of these women could be one of my characters in like a live action. Like I would absolutely love that. I do not feel that I am the right person to write that. So it would be something where I would definitely bring on like a trans writer to kind of create the ground for that, the storylines, all of that, and fitting that within the Aza universe. I mean, it's all about women's empowerment. Absolutely.
Okay. Going into another media, are you thinking about video games?
Yes, that is exactly who I'm talking to now. So that's kind of the next step for Aza is video games. Aza, actually, the company that I own is Aza Entertainment, which is a production company. So it encompasses a lot of things, from music publishing to television and film development to all of those things. Because when I created Aza Comics, it was with the thought of developing all of these things into all of these mediums. One of my favorite companies is Disney. So like when I was creating this, I read this 900-page book on Walt Disney. And I studied their company and how they did all of that. And I was like, well, to give women the proper marketing, the proper exposure that they deserve, I'm going to have to go into all these different mediums. So when I was creating Aza Comics, I actually talked to like production companies to figure out how the film industry worked. I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't know how any of it worked. Ann Nocenti, who's like an editor and writer for DC and Marvel, she was one of my first mentors. She sat down with me on a Sunday and explained to me the whole comic book industry, how all of it works, how you put together the whole thing. I talked to gaming companies. I talked to television and film people. Like I just really learned how all of it worked so that I could definitely be able to give these girls that multimedia platform for sure. So yeah.
Okay. Let's see, this one's sort of historical. Well, definitely is. What messages are important in our time, do you think? And how does this time compare to other times of repression like the 1950s? Simple question.
Right, a few layers. I would say in this era, it's definitely about accepting people for who they are. So a lot of the previous era, like the 1950s, there was this false reality that was trying to be presented. Like there were a lot of people who didn't grow up in two-parent homes, or they didn't have parents at all, or they didn't have the picket fence, or they didn't grow up in a suburb. So it's like they were trying to push this ideal that for a lot of people just did not exist, and basically saying if you don't have these things, then you are not happy. And in today's society, we're learning, one, there are more kinds of people that exist out there. There are more kinds of happiness can look a lot of different ways. There is no one way for happiness. There is no one way to live. There are so many different ways to live. And just because you didn't have this one thing or have this other thing does not mean that there's something wrong with you. Like you can live your life the way that you want to live your life. Just be respectful to others, be respectful to yourself. And really that's all you need to do. Like the time period that we're living in now, it's a lot of clash going on simply because you have a group of people that doesn't feel like another group of people deserve to be respected. And they're fighting that. They're fighting respecting other people. Like that's literally the foundation of that. And that's what I think that's what comic books are about today. It's just reflecting the different ways that you can be. There is no one way to be.
Another historical question. were you inspired, and I think you mentioned this a bit, but were you inspired by any real historical female heroes, like historical women who did important things?
Oh yeah, every single character in the Aza universe, with the exception of maybe Ixchel, was inspired by a real person. So Tamar, who was Kala's mother, was inspired by my own mom, as well as I tend to mix together a few different people when I'm creating like profiles for a character. So like I made like this person's personality or this other person's characteristic or this other thing. So yeah, like they're all inspired by real people. Tamar, who is Kala's mother, was inspired by my own mother, Janet Jackson, and Queen Hatshepsut, like all put together. And we have Nari, who was inspired by the people of Melanesia. She's like, basically, she's dark brown skin. She's these blonde, curly ringlets, just like the people of that area. So, I mean, they're all inspired by real people for sure. Kala, one of Kala's aunts, was inspired by Carla Gugino. Go figure. So it's like there are real people, some of them historical, some just kind of, I guess, really popular, who all inspire different women, different characters.
Okay. I have one that pulls back a little bit from Aza to the larger comic universe. Can you speak to the instances where some female heroes have taken on the monikers of formerly male heroes and really grown into those roles in successful ways? And they reference Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, etc.
That is interesting. Because I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about Captain Marvel until the film. For writing purposes, I actually stopped watching superhero movies, and I stopped reading comic books just so that when I was creating the Aza universe, I could do it from an organic place and I wasn't being influenced by other people and other things within the same. I didn't want to create more of the same, so I wanted to kind of come fresh. But with the Captain Marvel movie, I actually didn't know much about her. I had to like read up. So I don't know, like it's been one of those things that's kind of difficult because oftentimes when you're dealing with legacy companies like DC and Marvel, a lot of times they'll do, like Wonder Woman is like a character they created. She is her own character. Vixen, her own character. And then you have like Batgirl, who's kind of like a play on Batman. Like they often kind of do that. I don't really know. Like the most successful one that I saw was Captain Marvel. But I feel like it's kind of one of their things where they don't necessarily want to introduce a completely new character. Oftentimes it doesn't work well. So they're kind of pulling on that legacy. They're pulling on the fact that everybody knows, like, let's say Batman. So when they introduce Batgirl, like people are, okay, they'll drift towards it because they're familiar with Batman. So that I really can't say. I really can't say.
Okay, back to you. Do you have social media or Instagram?
I do. My personal social media, I'm mostly on Twitter on a personal thing. It's mostly me. It's like the most things that are on Twitter is me like tweeting about my telenovelas. I love Spanish soaps and like Janet Jackson. That's mostly what I do on Twitter. But Aza Comics, I release content on like Facebook, on Instagram, and I've released some things on TikTok. My 10-year-old sister has kind of got me into it. So now I'm starting to like, I don't know, see what that's about. But it's all Aza Comics. If you type in Aza Comics, it pops up. But yeah.
So I think we have time for two more or
Okay.
one more. Could you speak to the villains in your universe? Are there female ones?
Yes. As I said, I am a huge lover of Spanish soaps. And like in the Spanish soaps, the female villains are everything. They have the best dialogue. They have the best outfits. Their storylines are like really the best. And so I kind of pull a lot of that into my creation for the villains. And I actually get excited about them because it's like your villain, if your superhero is only as strong as your villain is. So I really go all the way out. I put as much effort into the development of the villain as I do in the development of characters. So for me, oftentimes, like, the villain is sometimes the best part of the story. Like, if anybody watches Once Upon a Time, like, I love the evil queen. Like, I loved all of that. So when creating them, I really pushed the envelope with how far they're willing to go. And with this particular villain, I can't speak on it yet because that part of the book story arc hasn't been released. So I can't say too much about it. But everybody's going to love this particular villain. My villains are not always female. Sometimes they're men as well. Like this, in the first book, it's very much Kieran, but the villains definitely evolve with time. And you'll see what I'm talking about as the storyline progresses. But you definitely are in store for some really awesome stuff with my villains because I absolutely love villains.
Okay, one last one. Maybe a silly question, but do you have T-shirts? I want to give them for Christmas presents.
Yes, I have plenty of T-shirts. And if there's an actual character that you want that I don't have a T-shirt for, I can have one made for you. But if you go to the azacomics.shop, the official Aza Comics store, there's plenty of T-shirts. I got T-shirts for kids, T-shirts for tweens, T-shirts for adults, different kinds, different characters, everything. Even T-shirts for guys. Got T-shirts for everybody.
Okay, well, that's the questions we have. Stacy, do you want to take it away?
Okay, thank you so much, Jazmin. This has been awesome. Just wanted to share that we have so many messages of support for you and what you're doing, and just thanking you for expanding this old ideal of female superheroes and kind of bringing us into current times. So just wanted to pass that along. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. Please do check our social media. We will have another History and Highballs in September. But in the meantime, stay safe, and everyone have a good evening. Thank you, Jazmin, so much.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming out or watching online.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.